Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to game number 2 in between Capoch and Erik. This is part of a best of 3 in the round of 32s of EGC Winter Series number 3. The winner gets the majority share of $3,000 prize pool and also some seeding points for the upcoming S tier major EGC Winter Championship. The map is going to be the home map of Erik, who lost game number 1. It is High View, and since in game number 1 we had Rus mirrors being played, we will have no Rus for this game. On the left side is Capoch playing as the English in blue, and to the right it is going to be Erik playing as the Abbasids. So the first thing that we're noticing on High View here is that this map is stacked with stealth forests, but in this particular generation, you see there is a very limited amount of stealth forests in between the two players. Most of those are on the sides. Oftentimes you see a lot more stealth forests in between the two players, and whenever the players are heading towards the opponent's base, obviously they could be caught off guard in those stealth forests, so that's something that you have to be considerate of. Abbasids versus English, not something that you see every day in open land maps, but obviously Capoch is a big fan of the English civilization, whereas for Erik, I'm curious to see what he has on his mind with the Abbasid dynasty. Part of the reason why I'm not necessarily a major fan of the English on this map is the stealth forest system. So when you're playing the English, you're mostly playing with longbowmen, you don't really have a ton of scouts accompanying your army, which means that whenever you're heading through that stealth forest, you will have a limited vision. And especially against Abbasids in Castle Age that can make mangonels with their infantry, there's a likely possibility that you're just heading through that forest with your longbows, and 5 tiles away is an enemy mangonel from you that you will not be spotting. So there's definitely quite a lot of risk picking the English on this map. Abbasids, I kind of think that they have a good matchup against the English here, but it really depends on how Erik is going to approach this, because there is multiple ways he could play this. He could try to play 2 town center play if he feels like Capoch wants to go for the defensive approach. He could try to go very aggressive, but, well, we'll have to see what he has on his mind. I'm really unsure what he has planned just yet. He has managed to collect some sheep, whereas on the other side, Capoch seems to be rather low on those herdables underneath his town center. I only count like 3 carcasses or so at maximum, so not a ton of sheep to work with. Whereas on the other side, there's a little bit more for Erik. Erik does have a second scout going for him, something that we haven't talked about yet, so that's going to help a tiny bit when it comes to gathering sheep, whereas Capoch is only operating with that one initial scout that he starts with. Tutelage on the way for Capoch with the council hall, as usual, with 4 villagers building it, whereas on the other side, I would expect the economy wing to come out pretty soon. So, one of the things that we have seen with the Abbasids being done against the English quite early on is a horseman defense into 2 town center boom. I think it was Vortex or Lucifron that did something like that in Winter Series 2. So the idea is that the English are almost guaranteed to go for longbowmen, which means that you can counterpick that with straight horsemen. There is just no variety in the English unit composition at the beginning, so you can just blindly go for horsemen because you know longbows are coming anyways. Now obviously the English can mix in some spearmen, but just by having a couple of horsemen out, you can delay that initial push. And the idea is that you play very defensive with quite a lot of horsemen. Try to be the aggressor. Try to go for raids. Go for an early blacksmith. Grab yourself your second pierce armor upgrade, so you do have 2 pierce armor on your horsemen. And then just play a 2 town center boom. Get to Castle Age and then see if you can switch into men-at-arms or knights, depending on how the game goes. But this is the main concept. This is a somewhat risky build if you do this, because one bad fight with your horsemen and you're pretty much dead. But we have seen this work out with the Abbasid dynasty. The key thing is making sure that you are the aggressor and that Capoch is forced to defend and he's just unable to push you. Looks like we don't have any kind of stone being mined right now for Erik though, so he's going to stay on 1 town center for the time being. It is almost guaranteed that he's grabbing fresh foodstuffs upon hitting Feudal Age, and the rest is yet to be seen. Capoch up to Feudal, so the good old-fashioned longbow rush is about to begin for him. Looking at his eco balance, he's got 8 on wood, he's got 9 on food, and only 1 left on gold. That 1 lady left on gold is going to get her enough so that you can grab an early blacksmith upgrade, although we also see a mill being dropped by Capoch. Given the fact that he's got minimal amount of deer carcasses underneath his town center, I would expect him to go for berries first, but also start adding a ton of farms, because obviously English farming also gives you a very nice food economy, so that's something that you can consider. Erik going double stable in Feudal Age, and for now, still no stone being bind, but it is going to be a double stable horseman build. Looking at his food eco, though, I only count 5 villagers and he's not on berries, which is a little uncharacteristic with the Abbasids. Oftentimes when you see this build being done, you see villagers sent to berries quite early on because that is a very nice source of food for the Abbasids, and you see a lot more villagers on food. He's heavy on the wood department, though, so I'm suspecting that he wanted to gather enough for a second town center. Right? Nope. That's not enough. Weird eco balance so far for him, because he gathered a ton of wood, but he's not really going to use that anytime soon. He's going crazy on the eco switches. That's something that we're seeing a lot from certain players. Instead of having a fairly balanced eco, let's say having 5 villagers on wood and then 5 on food, he's like, okay, I'm gonna have 10 on wood right now, and then once I collected a ton of wood, I'm just going to send 8 or 9 villagers to food. So some people are a lot more aggressive when it comes to pulling villagers away from resources. Usually what I've noticed is that AoE 2 players are the ones that like to have slightly more balanced ecos, and the players that come from other RTS titles are a lot more aggressive when it comes to pulling villagers. Neither of those are necessarily better than the other. It is just a different approach at this point. So Erik is going double Unstable Horseman. It looks like we're also seeing an archer range, so he wants to play 1 TC, and it's going to be a very aggressive gameplay from him. Double Stable Horseman, and he is dropping an archer range for a couple of archers. For Capoch, he's been pursuing that 1 scout down here, and that delays his push quite a bit. As things stand, we have a sneaky villager position here with an outpost for Capoch. I kind of like that. Your opponent is very unlikely to look for you up here, and even if he does, you have a tower here. So I kind of feel like for Capoch, this is a bit of a gamble, but this is a kind of gamble which is going to pay off quite easily, and it's relatively low risk, because, as I said, it's unlikely that Erik is going to look for his opponent over here, especially with all these stealth forests around. It's somewhat unlikely that Erik will ever find this. Meanwhile, for Erik, looks like he's adding villagers on stone after all, so there is going to be a second town center in the end. Once again, he pulled a dozen of villagers, 2 lumberjacking, and he's kind of low on the food getter count. He's looking for that second TC. Looking at his base, I think you could justify that second town center to be up here on the gold and the stone, because you need to protect your gold mines somehow. Looks like Capoch is already mixing in the Spearman, as you would expect. With the English, you get the Hardened Spearman upgrade for free, so that's going to help quite a bit. Whereas on the other side, for now, you only see a handful of archers being mixed in. Their role, obviously, is to snipe Spearmen, but this is still a difficult micro situation for Erik, because your archers only have 5 range, as opposed to the longbows having 7. Which means that what Capoch will do is snipe down your few archers before sending in the spears. So it's going to be very difficult for Erik to kill the spearman before his archers die, and for that reason, this army is still slightly better for Capoch. And of course, Capoch will be more than happy to just sit back and defend for the time being, because he's got some farming potentially in the near future, got some hunt going for him, and of course, his opponent is going to be on second town center soon, but the villager discrepancy is non-existent right now. It's 29 to 30, so at this point, Capoch is not behind in villager count, he's got the better army. And I feel like he could think about working towards Castle Age if he's not getting pushed at all, and just go for potentially a Men-at-Arms play, because that could work nicely. Here comes Erik. Obviously, with the stealth forests around, it's a lot easier to hide these counterattacks from your opponent, and you see Erik's got some carefully positioned scouts in the stealth forests. So he knows exactly where Capoch's army is at. This is a very clever move from him, having 1 scout in here and having 1 scout in here, because he knows exactly Capoch is here. And I wouldn't even be surprised to see him waiting with this force until this army moves out. The moment Capoch moves out and gets like here, you want to send in those horsemen. So, a clever strategy by Erik, and it's all about that information warfare, knowing what your opponent is up to. And that's why those stealth forests are very important. And you see Erik now knows the army is moving out. He's going to think about moving in with the horsemen as those archers are moving out. On the contrary, as you see, because there are minimal amount of scouts mixed in for Capoch, he has basically no vision into the stealth forest, so he's running completely blind over here. He's got 1 scout for him. He may have spotted that force of horsemen in the end, because to me it's very suspicious that he's moving to the left side, but it's the only scout he has, and that has to acquire the targets. He managed to acquire the target now. He sees the horseman coming in. For Erik, it would be a great decision to turn back and kill that scout, because that is the only thing that gives information to Capoch And that's exactly what he's trying to do. Horsemen trying to charge in on the scout, but they won't be able to kill it. They will isolate one archer though. A second one might also go down, but with 2 volleys coming out from those longbows, the horsemen die quite easily. Horsemen not having that second defense upgrade hurts quite a bit right now. Still, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you already have Erik with some stone in the bank. You could technically think about a second town center, but he decided not to do that. You see, he's at 261, and he made an arrow slits tower, so he was at 311. To me, it very much seemed like he wanted to go for a second TC, but then he changed his mind because he pulled all the villagers from stone. He doesn't have the wood in the bank either, and he depleted some of his stone stockpiles by making this arrow slits emplacement on that tower. Capoch right now, still sort of blind in the forest, as you see. This is the biggest risk with the English. You have a slow-moving army. Imagine that you're up against mangonels. By the time you spot them, you are dead. Obviously, once you have some towers up, that's going to give you multiple benefits. It's going to give you insight into these stealth forests, and it's also going to increase your network of castles influence. So that's going to help a tiny bit. And you see, Erik knows that. He knows exactly that the moment these towers are exposed, you want to start burning them down, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's going to burn down the tower on the left side, kill the longbowman inside as well. Meanwhile, though, you already have the longbows crawling up. And for Capoch, does he have the siege upgrade? The answer is that he's going to have the siege upgrade in a matter of moments. So, soon enough, you're going to see those longbows making battering rams. And now, Erik has to pull all his lumberjacks. Second TC, just not coming in the end. He also has a tower out here. Interesting town center position, because it's not close to any single resource. Maybe it would have been better to place it in between any of these forests or so. Horsemen now looking to intercept some reinforcements. Obviously, Erik having that scout over here and seeing a tiny bit into that stealth forest helps a bit. So he can acquire some targets, cut off the reinforcements. And it looks like he's splitting his horsemen. He's trying to intercept the villager, and that is going to be the forward villager down for Capoch. So no more towers for the time being. And now with Capoch crawling up with his army, this might be the chance for Erik to launch a counterattack and get some damage done on the lumberjacks or the gold mine. The horsemen still don't have the second defense upgrade, so that's going to be missing, and that's going to make them a little more vulnerable to arrow fire. Horsemen now charging in. Looks like we might have one villager going down here. Nope. Capoch gets back to the town center. As things stand, Capoch will be able to hold his economy, and he has a defensive tower coming in as well. Still, it's obviously annoying that your opponent is raiding you like that, but the core concept here is that you just want to delay Capoch at this point. You know exactly that you won't be able to kill Capoch with those raids. So what you want to do is just force him to defend, force him to repel those raids, and behind that one, have a 2-town center boom. As things stand, it's 42 villagers for Erik, 40 for Capoch. So he's yet to capitalize on that boom, but you already have Capoch moving in with a battering ram. Response will be quite a decent amount of archers, though, from Erik, so that's going to help out picking off those spearmen. I think if Erik gets the defense upgrade, he has a good chance of fighting this off. He doesn't have a blacksmith, though, and it is not even being constructed as we speak, so he's not going to have that. Nice move with the horseman to try and burn down the tower, because obviously that network of castles bonus is something that he wants to get rid of before taking this engagement. He will disengage, pull the spearmen all the way to the back, and then loop around archers, getting some nice shots on that battering ram. Obviously, when the battering ram is not being repaired, it's going to be slowly ground down by the arrow fire. It's a very slow process, but being able to get some free arrow shots on that battering ram is obviously something that helps. The horseman numbers are looking quite decent for Erik, and he's still looking to take that tower down. Beautiful move to intercept those reinforcements, but still, he is yet to address this problem inside his base, which is a quite considerable problem, having 28 longbows and a dozen of spearmen ready to push his base. Horsemen swoop in and take down the tower. That's a nice move over there. Also killing a couple of units that were garrisoned inside. Behind this one, Capoch still has his funding operation up north, so that really has paid off for him. Rams now walking towards that town center, and this is where Erik is going to have to make a stand. Horsemen are being pulled to try and get some torches in, and it looks like Capoch mismicroed his army a tiny bit over here because he left those rams unguarded, so a couple of torches were thrown in the direction of the rams. Still, Erik will have to take one decisive fight here. If he loses that fight, I think it's game over for him, and he's out from Winter Series number 3. Horsemen still yet to have that second defense upgrade come in. For now, Erik is focusing on numbers rather than quality of the units. He's got the numbers advantage, though. So, Erik Despite the fact that he's facing 54 units, he's got 52 himself, but obviously those horsemen are quite powerful beasts, so the army value is on the side of Erik right now. Villagers once again being pulled to try and burn down the rams. Remember that villagers are somewhat throwaway units at this point for Erik, simply because he can replenish them quite easily with 2 town centers and having a cheaper cost on them. Now we have the big fight coming up. Gotta love the move that Erik is committing to this one, even with the villagers. This is not necessarily the best fight ever for him, though, because the horsemen were fighting the spearmen for a long time. But now he's slowly grinding down the spearmen numbers, still trying to focus on the rams, though. So as things stand, he doesn't want to destroy that army, he just wants to repel this attack. Ultimately, I think Capoch got the better out of this fight. He killed a ton of villagers, and ultimately, the most important thing for Capoch is that he didn't lose his army. You see dead bodies littering the battlefield at this point. Capoch will be able to replenish those 2 rams quite easily, whereas for his opponent, the horseman numbers were decimated quite heavily, archers were killed, and ultimately, if you look at the villager count, Erik is at 48, Capoch is at 48 as well. So this 2 town center difference is just not showing at all. Nice move from Erik to move out for this hunt as well. That's going to give him a tiny bit of a good eco here because he's depleting the berries and he's just now starting to add farms. But Capoch is assembling another big push here, and I really feel like Erik needs those blacksmith upgrades. In particular, that defense upgrade for both his archers and his cavalry would be extremely useful, because if you look at Capoch, he has gotten those. So Capoch has gotten the melee defense upgrade, the range defense upgrade, the ranged attack, and he's now grabbing the melee attack even. Horsemen thinking about the counterattack here, although it looks like they will once again just swoop around, trying to intercept some reinforcements. They are trying to repeat this move every once in a while. The problem is that they're not really slowing down Capoch's progress, who, behind this one, has the better economy as well. Obviously, in the long run, having 2 town centers is gonna pay off for Erik, but it is a slow process, especially when you lose so many villagers. Rams once again opening up on that town center. Have 3 battering rams, 2 of them being full HP, 1 of them being somewhat damaged. But the biggest thing now is that Capoch has a tower up here, so he's gonna have the network of castles bonus affecting all of his army around that tower, and that's a scary bowl of longbowmen. We're talking about 39. So as things stand, you have 66 army for Capoch, 55 for Erik. Slightly better army numbers for Capoch, but the biggest thing, I think, is that he's got good upgrades. He's got fully upgraded longbowmen in the feudal age, whereas his opponent has minimal upgrades on those horsemen. You see, basically, that big ball of longbowmen is able to single shot a horseman with a volley, and that's exactly what Capoch wants to do. You first want to grind down those horseman numbers, because then your longbow should be able to deal with most of those archers. Rams being pulled back, and once again, as Erik's forces are retreating, they're being picked apart by those longbowmen. Ultimately, if you look at the KD, it is 47 for Capoch in terms of kills, 29 for losses. He's been taking good engagement throughout this game, and despite the fact that his eco is a tiny bit weaker, obviously, such a level of efficiency pays off really fast. He's once again trying to take that town center down. Villagers are being pulled against the battering rams, but once again, Capoch will just pull back, and he forces his opponent to charge him with the cavalry. You see, the spearmen aren't even in the fight, because Capoch knows that longbowmen will perform at a decent level against all those horsemen. Now this push seems to be quite powerful though from Erik. Spearmen joined the party as well, villagers also being pulled. Capoch looks like he's gonna have to make a stand over here. Couple of more spearmen joined the battle though. Horsemen all disappeared, as Capoch will trade off archers against his opponent. Numbers seem to be rather even, but you have the network of castles with the extra fire rate for Capoch. And of course, he's got longbows, which have a larger base attack than the archers as well. So even though the numbers are relatively even, the quality is slightly better for Capoch here. Tower ungarrisoned, so it's not shooting a single arrow at this point. And the biggest problem, I think, at this point for Erik is that the amount of resources invested into those horsemen were huge, and he lost them way too easily. So you see, at the end of the day, it's an even trade of armies, but throughout this game, Capoch had the better resource income, so Capoch is more than happy with an even trade, and you see Erik is running out of juice at this point. Erik, minimal army left on the battlefield. Capoch still has 39. Reinforcements are just flooding in at this point, whereas for Erik, he's down to just 9 army. And Capoch actually has the villager lead over his opponent, despite the fact that Capoch has been playing on 1 town center for the majority of the game. Now Capoch is leveraging that English farming eco as well. Another ram push is coming in. Erik is pretty much out of resources. He has no gold access, and this is looking extremely difficult to compensate for. Capoch has a pretty decent bank of gold even. He doesn't even need that much. Once again, he pulls in the ram, forces the villagers to jump out, picks up 3 villas, and then calls it a day. The only thing that he could do differently is contest the left side a tiny bit, and that's exactly what he's doing. Longbowmen now come in, and that's going to cut off the hunting here for Erik. Longbowmen, they could just try to harass this area. There is one defensive tower in the town center out there, but if you run past that tower with longbows and camp like over here, you could just deny this entire lumberjacking operation. Erik now starving for food because he's moving out with what is 15 villagers to this patch of huntables. He only has a handful of farms, and obviously that's not sufficient to maintain what is 4 archer ranges worth of archer production, and of course stable. Quite a lot of archers on the battlefield for Erik, and this is the moment where Capoch could think about adding a couple of his early men-at-arms, because that could help a lot, soaking up the arrow fire and just dealing with those archers. Town center once again under attack as Capoch is banking up resources for Castle Age. Ram's now knocking on the walls of that town center. Villagers are still being pulled to repairs, so this town center isn't going down, which, by the way, would be a disaster for Erik, because keep in mind that he is the Abbasid, so he only has 2 landmarks to lose at this point, the House of Wisdom and the town center here. So if those are destroyed, it really doesn't matter that he's got all of these things at the back, because he's going to get defeated. Looks like villagers are jumping out once again, trying to deal with that ram. Capoch is on the way to Castle Age though, and he's going for the King's Palace, which I think is the right decision here. You could go for the White Tower and just amp up the pressure even more, but I think at this point, you're behind by 1 town center, but you have the Castle Age advantage. Might as well go for the King's Palace, so that you now have 2 town centers working for you as well. Capoch is at 64 vills, his opponent is at 59, so that villager difference will probably remain in place for the time being. Now for Capoch, men-at-arms could be the unit of choice, because that's not something that the Abbasids can easily counter in Feudal Age. And of course, Veteran Longbowman also being pulled as an upgrade. Wouldn't be surprised to see the blacksmith upgrades popping out pretty soon for Capoch as well. This is looking really good for him. And for Erik, the biggest problem is that his resource bank is just very, very minimal, and he's not going into Castle Age. So it's one thing that his army is half as big as Capoch's one. The biggest problem is that he's still stuck in Feudal Age, and men-at-arms would just be able to destroy him. Somewhat similar to the previous game. It's a very similar scenario. Rus have a hard time against the men-at-arms in Feudal Age, so do the Abbasids. So Capoch, having one of the best men-at-arms available in the game with the English and the clad armor, you could really justify him going for that. Looks like he is just going to stick with the longbowman and spearman composition for the time being, and we'll have a battering ram coming in. Once again, you see, Erik wants to go back to that gold mine, but that's never gonna be possible at this point, and the other alternative in terms of gold mining is out here, which is also being denied. So part of the reason why Erik is stuck in Feudal Age is because he simply has no accessible gold. 2 of his gold mines are out here, which are quite exposed, and the 3rd one is out here, and you see now he has to pull all the villagers out there. Capoch doesn't have any units nearby, which is I think a little bit of a mistake, but he's heading over there with some forces, so I think he's suspecting that at some point his opponent has to move out here, and that's exactly the situation. Until then, Erik is going to start walling off the left side, but I'm not exactly sure if these walls will all finish by the time those forces arrive. Even if they do, there are some spearmen in there supported by longbowmen, so technically you can take those walls down quite easily. Ram push, number 3 coming in here for Capoch, trying to knock down that town center once again. I think you could even justify trying to go for the House of Wisdom instead, because you can find a very nice angle on the House of Wisdom from this right side, and it's a lot more difficult for Erik to pull villagers to fight that. Dozens of archers out here now for Erik, but of course, these are Feudal Age archers, and I'm still unsure if Erik has a blacksmith. I don't think so. So Erik still has completely unupgraded Feudal archers over here, whereas Capoch's forces are now fully upgraded Castle Age longbows, so these are just much more powerful forces right now for Capoch, and he's even making a mining camp right next to his opponent's gold mine. On the left side, it looks like the forces of Capoch also get in. The walls were incomplete, and with that, the gold mine once again will be denied, and that's a fairly sizable force as well for Capoch, harassing the lumberjacking operation. You see, Erik is going to dispatch some archers himself to deal with that, but this is once again just setting Erik back so much. And with that, the town center is about to fall, because It's no longer being repaired. Villagers are no longer being pulled. I think you can commit to this one if you're Capoch now. Get your archers close and just force a fight because you have the quality advantage on your units by a massive margin. Capoch is playing this one very, very safely, which I like a tiny bit because obviously he has a massive lead, so he doesn't want to throw that away. But I think he could play a little more aggressively because he's got the tools and he's got the army to make this happen. Town center constantly, little blaze, villagers are being pulled to repair. But at this point, I think it's just a matter of time because the lack of map control, it's starting to hurt pretty badly for Erik. He was looking for that army that he's going to clean up on the left side ultimately. But you see, rams are already being built by Capoch, so he wants to start blasting his way through those walls. And I think he finally commits to this fight, trying to go for the ram push on that town center. So many villagers die as well from Erik, so that 2 town center play from him is not really showing. You see, Capoch now has a 21 villager advantage with 2 town centers for both, simply because Erik constantly has to pull villagers to take down the rams, and Capoch knows that. Capoch knows exactly that Erik needs to pull villagers, and every single move with these rams will force the villagers to jump out, get a couple of villager kills, and then Capoch pulls the rams back. So he's basically trading the health of his rams to the villagers of the opponent, and that's a perfectly acceptable trade at this point for him. The town center is going to go down. Now he commits to this one, and with that, I see Erik's chances being basically non-existent at this point. He's got a ram push coming in the middle, so this hunt, or at least what's left of it, is going to be gone. And now Erik's landmark, the House of Wisdom, is getting pushed. He's just now going up to Castle Age with the military wing, but I feel like this is just too far gone at this point, because I'm not even sure if he can finish the military wing. There is still about 1.5 minutes left of that, and indeed he acknowledges that his army is just no match for the forces of Capoch. And with that, Capoch moves into the next round. Quite convincing 2-0 win for him, and really, I think the biggest thing here for Capoch in this set was finding his way up to Castle Age a little faster than the opponent. In game number 1, it was fairly obvious because Erik went for a Feudal Age push, but in this game, I think the biggest thing was that he diagnosed that his opponent isn't really going to push him. He's going for a 2-town center play. So despite playing quite aggressive throughout the game, he still managed to get the better Castle Age timing out there, and then using that Castle Age timing, he had the technology advantage, and then he just played the map control game very, very smart. He went in on the left side with longbows to try and harass the villagers on the hunt, on the gold, and on the right side he denied those gold mines really well. Ultimately, part of the reason why Erik was set back this heavily is of course because he had limited access to gold. You see, he gathered less than 1,000 gold in this entire game,